The knight is unique in that it represents multiple threats or multiple forks that are not always clear. Most of them are, but some of them may not necessarily be directly clear. Now, if we surround this knight here with 8 different queens, you'll notice that the knight can attack each one of these queens, while none of these queens can attack the knight. Now, if we just put a knight in the center, like we have right here, we all know there's 8 different ways the knight can move. However, those 8 different ways or moves translate into 124 different fork combinations, and that's just for one knight. So 2 knights would represent 248 different fork combinations if they're in the center in a game. So let's take a look at how we got to each one. There's 21 for each one of these 4, and there's 10 for each one of these 4 moves, and that comes out to 124 different fork combinations. And we'll look at this in a little more detail coming up in an example. Okay, we have an early game. It's 2 moves in, and we got these 2 knights right here for white that we're looking at, and they can move forward in 8 potential ways. Now, if they were in the center, they'd have up to 16 potential moves in an open game, assuming they were defended. But they've got a decent center or a decent range of moves here. Let's take a look at this particular knight on C3, and let's look at how many different combinations the knight can set up. First, we're going to look at the A4 square, and there's 1 combination there. Next, we'll look at the B5 square, and there are 10 different combinations from that square the knight can attack. Now we'll look at the D5 square, and there are 21 different fork combinations that the white knight can set up from the D5 square. And lastly, we'll look at the E4 square, and there are 10 different fork combinations that the white knight can set up from that particular square. And that translates into, just in this particular game, 42 different fork possibilities just for the C3 knight. Now, if we use both knights here, that would translate into 84 different fork possibilities. Obviously, the more pieces and stuff, you might lower that, but potentially in an open game, just having these 2 knights in the spot here could translate to 84 potential forks, which makes these things complicated and somewhat tricky because they sit there all game, and move 10, move 20, move 30, all of a sudden, boom, you're caught off guard with something you didn't see coming because it's kind of complicated. Now we're going to walk through 4 different examples, and before each, I'll just let you know that right here that if you'd like, you can go ahead and hit pause. I'm going to try to cover these each fairly quickly. Let's get the first one right here. It's black to move, and we're going to focus on the E4 knight. And we're going to focus on this undefended piece, or the undefended pawn on F2. And if black takes that, it sets up a fork between the king and the rook. The king will have to move, and white has to give up a rook. Now let's focus on this example here. It's a little bit trickier. Again, we're looking at the D4 knight right here. And it's black's turn, and black would like to set up some type of fork here. Well, if black goes to the F3 square, that sets up a fork of the queen and the king. But on its face, what you might say, well, white can simply take the pawn on G2 and recapture that knight to block the fork. Okay, well, white's going to have to do something, or white's going to have to move the king. And the problem that's presented in this, or the problem that this fork presents, is that now the queen is exposed to capture, or the queen on D2 is exposed to capture. And In this example, white resigned shortly after that, or white would have been finished off if white had played out the rest of the game. Now let's shift gears and focus on another example here. In this example, we have black to move, and we're going to focus on these two knights right here, and we're going to look at a potential fork that'll essentially seal the deal for black. And we're going to focus on the c5 knight and the d3 square, and that represents a fork of the king and the queen. And the nice thing about knight forks on the king, when the king is one of the pieces being forked, is that the king has to move, which typically will result in the forking player winning a lot of material there. And we're going to focus on another example here. This time it's white to move, and we're focusing on the d7 knight. And if the d7 knight moves to the c5 square, that represents a fork of the rook and the pawn, and most likely will result in white winning the b7 pawn, and that way white can start whittling down material and take advantage of its material advantage here and in the game. And that essentially wraps up our overview of knight forks. Keep in mind they're very tricky, and try to look for different ways that you can set up an advantage when you play. Thank you for watching.